It was just another quiet night in the countryside. The air was calm, the sky was clear, and most people in the small town of Halewood had already gone to bed. But for Ethan Morales, sleep was not easy to find. He stood on his back porch, staring into the trees behind his house, holding a warm cup of tea. Ethan had once worked in the city as a paramedic, saving lives and helping people through their worst moments. But a terrible event during a rescue mission had shaken him so deeply that he left everything behind and moved far away to live alone. He didn't talk to many people now. He liked the silence. He needed it. That night, something strange happened. A deep humming sound filled the air, like the earth itself was holding its breath. Then a flash of light streaked across the sky, brighter than any shooting star Ethan had ever seen. It was moving fast, too fast. And then, suddenly, a loud crashing sound exploded from the woods behind his property. Birds flew up in every direction. The ground trembled slightly under his feet. Ethan dropped his cup and ran toward the sound. He didn't know what he expected to find. Maybe a fallen plane? A meteorite? As he got closer to the trees, he noticed smoke rising in the distance. But when he reached the place where the object had crashed, he saw nothing clearly. The smoke was thick, and the air felt strangely heavy. The object had already buried itself deep into the forest floor, and it was too dark to make out the shape. But he saw something move, just for a second, a flicker, like a shadow slipping away into the trees, he called out, but no one answered. There was no fire, so he decided to return home and come back in daylight. Maybe it was just a meteorite after all. Maybe his eyes were playing tricks on him. But over the next few days, strange things started happening. He began noticing small signs near his backyard. Bent branches, quiet footsteps at night, items on his porch slightly moved. And once, when he was sitting in his kitchen, he felt like someone was watching him through the window. But when he looked, no one was there. Then one evening, as the sun was setting, Ethan saw her. At first he thought it was a lost woman or a scared traveler. She stood just inside the tree line, her body still and silent. Her long silver-tinted hair flowed down her back, and her eyes glowed faintly, like soft embers hidden under ash. Her skin had a gentle shimmer to it, like it was catching the last bit of sunlight. She didn't look human, but she didn't look dangerous either. There was something gentle, almost sad, in her face. He stepped forward, slowly. "Hey, are you okay?" he asked softly. But she didn't speak. She didn't move. And then, without a sound, she turned and disappeared into the trees. Ethan didn't sleep much that night. Over the following week, the figure kept appearing, always at a distance, always watching. She never came close, never tried to talk. But he noticed something in her eyes, fear, deep, heavy fear, and sorrow. She seemed to carry a weight so great it bent her shoulders. One day, Ethan left a blanket and some food near the edge of the forest. He didn't know if she would take it. But the next morning, both the blanket and the food were gone. In their place was a smooth, glowing stone, no bigger than a child's palm. He didn't understand what it meant, but he kept it. Ethan began to understand something important. This being, whoever or whatever she was, wasn't trying to harm anyone. She was alone, hiding, afraid. And somehow she had ended up here, injured, lost, and completely out of place. He started calling her Seren, a name that came to him in a dream. It meant star in an old language, and it felt right. He didn't tell anyone in the town. The people of Halewood didn't like strange things. They liked their routine, their rules, their quiet. If anyone found out about Seren, they would panic. He had seen it before, how quickly fear could turn into anger. But the more time passed, the more he felt connected to her, even without speaking. He would leave small things out for her, a book, some clothes, water, fruit. And every time, they disappeared. Once he found her footprints near the pond behind his house, small, light, and different from any human foot. One night, as he sat alone outside, he spoke into the air. "I don't know why you're here," he said softly, "but I don't think you're bad. I think you're hurt and scared." Behind the trees, she watched. She didn't know this man. She didn't trust humans. Not after what happened. She had seen her ship burn in the sky, seen her partner fade in her arms. She had felt the pain of loss deeper than the stars themselves. The few humans she had encountered after the crash had screamed at her, chased her, thrown rocks. But this human was different. He didn't chase. He didn't shout. He left her warm food and dry clothes. He spoke gently, and most of all, he didn't expect anything in return. She stayed hidden, but her heart, what was left of it, noticed, and, though she said nothing, and though she barely moved, she began to feel a strange, forgotten thing rise in her chest. Hope. The days passed slowly, but something had changed between Ethan and the silent alien woman he had named Serene. She still didn't come close, but she wasn't hiding as much now. Sometimes he would see her standing farther into the trees, her eyes calmly watching him as he worked in his garden or sat reading on the porch. She didn't seem to mean harm, but she kept her distance as if something inside her warned her not to trust. Ethan, patient as ever, didn't force anything. He continued placing food and water near the forest edge. He'd even leave her old clothes he found in storage. Soft shirts, warm blankets. Some were taken. Others remained untouched. Still, it gave him something to do. And deep down, he hoped that the small kindnesses would help her feel safe. He didn't know where she slept, or what she did when he wasn't around, but signs of her presence were growing clearer. Once he found tiny handprints on the muddy edge of his pond. Another time, he saw a soft light deep in the woods that flickered for a moment and then vanished. There were no batteries, no matches, no flames. Just a strange, gentle glow like something not of this earth. Then came the night that made everything change. Ethan had gone into the forest to check one of the old hiking paths. A storm had blown through the area the night before, and he wanted to see if any trees had fallen. He had no idea Seren was nearby, watching him from behind a thick curtain of leaves. He walked carefully, using a stick to test the muddy ground. But as he stepped over a small fallen branch, his foot slipped on a slick patch of wet moss. Before he could catch himself, he tumbled down the hill, landing hard on the rocky ground below. A sharp pain shot through his leg. He tried to move, but couldn't. He cried out, hoping someone might hear him, though he knew the nearest neighbor was almost a mile away. He lay there in pain, half-conscious, his vision fading in and out as the trees above him swayed in the wind. The daylight began to fade. The forest grew darker, and then he felt her. He didn't see her at first. He only felt something near him, warm and still. Then, a soft whisper brushed against his thoughts. Not spoken aloud, but directly into his mind. A voice, gentle and full of concern, said, "You're hurt, human? Let me heal you." Ethan blinked, trying to see clearly. She was there, kneeling beside him, her face close but still cautious. Her eyes held fear, but also something else. Worry. He tried to speak, but she placed her hand lightly on his shoulder, and he felt the warmth of her touch. Deeper than heat, more like energy, like something flowing gently through his skin. Her hand hovered over his injured leg, and a soft light began to form around her fingers, not glowing in a flashy way, but more like the light of a soft sunrise. He gasped as the pain in his leg started to fade. Not all at once, but little by little, as if her touch was stitching together something broken. His breathing slowed, his heartbeat settled. He didn't understand what was happening, but he didn't feel afraid. He watched her as she worked. Her face was calm but focused. Her long silver hair shimmered slightly like it moved with the air. She was unlike anything he had ever seen. So strange, yet so beautiful in a soft, natural way. She didn't speak again. She didn't need to. Her action said everything. After some time, she sat back, exhausted. The soft light around her hands faded. She looked at him one last time, and then, as silently as she had arrived, she stood and disappeared into the forest. Ethan lay there, stunned. The pain in his leg was almost gone. He could move again, though weakly. Slowly, carefully. He made his way back to the house, leaning on branches for support. He couldn't sleep that night. He kept thinking about her, about the way she looked at him, the way her voice sounded in his mind, the feeling of her energy flowing through him. She had saved him. She had risked everything to help him, even when she was afraid. The next morning, he walked to the spot where she had healed him. The ground still had a strange warmth to it, like the memory of her energy had not yet faded. And on a rock nearby, he saw something that made his chest tighten. Another stone, just like the one she had left before, but this time it was darker, marked with a tiny white symbol. It looked like a star with a tear falling from it. He picked it up and held it in his hand. That's when he realized something important. Seren wasn't just a visitor. She wasn't just lost. She had been through something terrible, something that made her afraid of everyone, maybe even of herself. But even with that pain, even with that fear, she had come to him when he needed help. She had trusted him, just a little. And now Ethan knew. It was his turn to do the same for her. He decided that he would find a way to speak to her, not just with words, but with kindness, patience, and truth. If she was going to live in fear forever, it wouldn't be because he didn't try to show her that not all humans wanted to hurt or use her. As he walked back to his house with the star-marked stone in his hand, he looked over his shoulder toward the trees. Somewhere in there, Seren was watching, maybe even listening. He smiled and whispered, "Thank you." And though no one answered, he felt something in the air. Soft, quiet, like a breath of wind through the leaves. Maybe it was her way of saying, "You're welcome." The days after the healing passed quietly. Ethan still felt the warmth of her touch in his leg, even though the injury was gone. He didn't need a doctor or bandages. What Seren had done was something beyond human medicine. But more than the healing, it was her voice he couldn't forget, not heard through his ears, but felt in his thoughts. Soft, caring, almost like a memory that stayed with him, gently repeating, "You're hurt, human. Let me heal you." He tried to spot her, again in the woods, but she didn't show herself. Still, he knew she was nearby. Every now and then, he'd catch the shadow of movement behind the trees. A breeze would shift the branches when the air was still. He started leaving small messages for her, nothing too long, just short notes, like, "Thank you," or "I hope you're safe." Sometimes they disappeared. Sometimes they remained untouched. But he kept writing them, hoping one day she would answer. One morning, Ethan stepped outside and found something on his porch that didn't belong to him. It was a folded piece of thin, silver-like fabric. Inside it was a small blue crystal, smooth and cool to the touch, with tiny white marks that looked like stars carved onto it. He didn't know what it meant, but he took it as a sign Seren was listening. And maybe, just maybe, she was starting to trust him. He continued his quiet routine, working in the garden, cooking simple meals, and walking the woods. The townspeople didn't know anything about Seren. He didn't tell them. They were used to living simple lives and didn't take well to strange things. If they found out about her, they might panic, or worse. Ethan remembered how people could act when they were scared. That's why he had left the city in the first place, but he was no longer scared of Seren. He was curious, And more than that, he wanted to help her, like she had helped him. One evening, after watering his plants, he sat outside and spoke gently toward the trees. "I don't know where you're from, but I know you're not bad. I see it in the way you moved, the way you healed me. You didn't have to, but you did." There was no reply, just the rustling of leaves in the soft wind. But then something changed. That night, Ethan woke to a strange sound, like a low hum, almost musical. He looked out his window and saw a soft glow coming from the trees. Not fire, not flashlight, something else. He stepped outside slowly, careful not to scare her off. At the edge of the woods, he saw her again. Seren stood just beyond the shadows, her body glowing faintly in the moonlight. Her silver hair moved gently as if the night breeze listened only to her. She didn't speak out loud, but her eyes met his, and for a moment it felt like time slowed down. She stepped forward, just one step, then stopped. Ethan didn't move. He just smiled. "It's okay," he whispered. "You don't have to be afraid." She tilted her head slightly, and for the first time, he noticed the marks on her arms, like faded scars or burns, hidden beneath the shimmer of her skin. Something had hurt her. Badly. Suddenly, she reached into a small pouch hanging by her side and pulled out a second crystal, clearer than the one she gave him before. She held it out with both hands. Ethan stepped forward carefully and took it. Soon as his fingers touched the crystal, his mind filled with images, brief flashes of her memories. A ship burning in the sky, her holding someone in her arms, a male of her kind, hurt and barely breathing. Humans surrounding the wreck, shouting, in fear. Her running, hiding, crying beneath a broken tree, all alone. Then the images stopped. Ethan stood still, stunned. He had just felt her pain, not as a story, but as if he'd lived it. She looked away, ashamed, and turned to leave. But Ethan called out softly, "I'm sorry. I didn't know." She paused. "You lost someone," he added. "And people didn't help you. They hurt you instead." Slowly, she turned back around. Her face showed no anger, only sadness, but also something else. A flicker of understanding. He had seen her pain, and he hadn't run from it. She stepped a little closer now, close enough for Ethan to see her more clearly than ever. She looked delicate, yet strong. Her eyes were deep, like they carried entire skies within them. She wasn't just an alien. She was someone who had lost everything. "I don't want anything from you," Ethan said. "I just want you to be okay." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, she slowly reached out, not to give something this time, but to touch. Her hand brushed his arm, soft and light, like a falling feather. And just like before, Ethan felt warmth flow through him, not healing this time, but comfort. A shared connection, trust. Then she whispered into his thoughts once more. "You are different." And just like that, she was gone again, into the woods, leaving only silence behind. Ethan stood there for a long time, the crystal still glowing in his hand. He didn't understand everything. He didn't know where Seren was from, or why she had picked his backyard to stay hidden. But he knew one thing for sure now. He wasn't just someone she had saved. He was someone she had chosen to trust. And in this strange, quiet bond between two very different beings, something new had begun to grow. Not fear, but hope. After that night, everything felt different. Ethan no longer felt like he was just living alone in the woods. He now felt that someone else was there, watching, listening, understanding. Seren had touched his arm gently, shared her thoughts with him, and even shown him pieces of her painful memories through that glowing crystal. That was more trust than she had ever given anyone. And he didn't take it lightly. Every day, he left fresh food at the forest's edge, even if she didn't always take it. Some nights he sat on the porch with 2 cups of tea, one for himself, one just in case. She never came forward to drink it, but once he found the cup empty the next morning. That was enough to make him smile for hours. But things outside of the woods were starting to change too. One morning, while Ethan was at the local store, he heard 2 men talking near the entrance. They were hunters from the nearby village. One of them was shaking his head and whispering, "Something's been moving out there in the trees at night. I saw a tall shadow last week. Not a deer. Not a person either. Gave me chills." The other one replied, "Might be that thing the military lost a few years ago. My cousin said there was a crash they never explained. You think it's connected?" Ethan pretended not to listen. He just paid for his groceries and left quickly. But worry had already settled in his chest. People were noticing something. That meant danger was close. Back home, he placed his hand on the tree nearest his porch, the one where Seren had stood the night she gave him the second crystal. He whispered softly, "They're starting to talk. You need to be careful." He didn't know if she heard him, but later that night, a small symbol was carved into the bark of the same tree. A curved line with 2 dots above it. It looked like an eye crying. She was warning him too. She was afraid. Then it happened. It was a Sunday afternoon. The sun was bright and the wind was calm. Ethan was fixing the fence on the far side of his property when he heard loud voices coming from the woods. He rushed toward the sound and saw 3 people, 2 men and a woman, walking through the trees with flashlights and cameras. They didn't look like locals. Their clothes were clean and too professional. Their bags had strange patches, and one of them carried a device that beeped as it moved. They were searching. Ethan kept his distance, hiding behind a thick bush. One of the men said, "It's here. The signal is stronger." The woman replied, "She has to be close. Stay alert." Ethan's heart pounded. They were talking about Seren. He had no doubt. He waited until they moved deeper into the forest before hurrying home. Once there, he grabbed a piece of paper and quickly wrote, "They're looking for you. Please stay hidden. Don't come near the house for now." He left the note at the usual spot with a piece of fruit beside it, hoping she would see it. That night, Seren didn't appear. Not even a shadow. The following days were tense. The strangers kept returning to the woods, sometimes speaking with locals, pretending to be bird watchers or researchers. But Ethan knew better. Their eyes were too sharp. Their questions too specific. One evening, while Ethan was closing his window shutters, someone knocked on his front door. He opened it slowly and found the woman from the forest team standing there. She smiled politely. "Sorry to bother you. We're conducting a wildlife study and heard you live near the forest. Have you noticed anything unusual lately?" Ethan kept his face calm. "Just the usual raccoons and deer," he said with a small shrug. "Nothing worth writing down," she nodded. "If you do see anything strange, would you let us know?" He gave her a tight smile. "Of course." She handed him a card. It had a number but no name, no company logo. Just numbers and a symbol, a small triangle with a line through it. As soon as she left, he threw the card into the fire. That night, he couldn't sleep. He sat on the porch, eyes on the trees, waiting for any sign of Seren. The moon was full, and the night was still. Then, just before dawn, she appeared again, but this time she looked tired. Her eyes were heavy and her movements were slow. She stepped out from the trees, holding something in her hand, a piece of broken metal shaped like a wing. Ethan stood up. "They're getting closer," he said gently. She nodded. "You can't stay here forever. Not like this." She looked up at him, sadness filling her face. Ethan took a step closer. "I'll help you. Whatever it takes. But you have to trust me." She stared at him for a moment, then reached out again, this time not with a crystal, but with her hand. He took it. Her fingers were cold, but they held strength. connection. And then she said it. This time out loud, her voice soft and slightly trembling. They fear me. But you see me. Ethan didn't reply. He just gave her hand a gentle squeeze. Suddenly there was a sound in the distance, crunching leaves, voices, flashlights flickering through the trees. They're here, Ethan whispered. Without a word, Seren pulled her hand back and ran into the forest, faster than he'd ever seen her move. The lights got closer. Ethan stood firm. One of the men stepped forward. Did you see anything? Ethan looked them in the eye. Just me, out for a walk. The men stared at him for a long time, then turned away. Ethan waited until the forest was silent again. Seren was gone, but he knew she was still nearby, still watching, still trusting him, and now more than ever he knew he had to protect her, because when someone saves your life not just with hands, but with heart, you don't just turn away, you stand with them, even if the world stands against you. The days that followed were the hardest Ethan had ever faced. Serene was still out there somewhere in the woods, but she didn't come near the house. The people who had been searching for her didn't leave, and their visits grew more frequent. Lights shone deep into the forest, and strange sounds echoed through the night. But Ethan never gave up hope. He spent his days preparing, trying to think of ways to keep Seren safe. He learned to move quietly through the trees, watching the paths where the strangers walked. Sometimes he found small clues, broken branches, footprints unlike any he'd ever seen before, or strange symbols carved into bark. These signs told him Seren was close but hiding. One afternoon, a sudden wildfire broke out near the edge of town. The dry grass caught fire quickly, and the wind pushed the flames toward the forest. People ran to save their homes, and the emergency sirens blared across the town. Ethan knew this could be a disaster for Seren. If she was trapped in the fire, there might be no way out. Without hesitation, Ethan grabbed his jacket and headed into the smoke-filled forest. The fire was crackling loudly, the heat burning his face, and the thick smoke made it hard to breathe. But he kept moving, calling out softly, "Seren, where are you?" Suddenly, he saw a flicker of movement near a fallen tree. It was her. Seren was there, her silver hair shining even in the smoky air. She looked weak, coughing, and her eyes were full of fear. Ethan rushed to her side and helped her stand. "We have to get out of here," he said, guiding her toward the safer path. But then the fire roared louder, blocking their way. The smoke thickened, and the heat felt unbearable. Seren stopped and looked at Ethan. "I can help," she said quietly. Before Ethan could say anything, she reached out her hands. A soft, warm light spread from her fingers, pushing the smoke and heat away. The air around them cleared a little, making it easier to breathe. It was as if her energy was creating a safe space. With her help, they moved carefully through the fire, slowly finding a way out. When they finally reached the edge of the forest, the townspeople were waiting with water and blankets. Everyone watched in silence, amazed by the strange woman who had appeared to save children trapped in the fire. Seren looked around, her eyes wide. For the first time, she saw people not as a threat, but as friends. Ethan stood beside her, proud, but also worried. He knew this was just the beginning. In the days that followed, the town slowly changed. The fear that once surrounded Seren turned into curiosity and respect. People asked questions, wanting to understand her story. Ethan helped by telling them about the kindness and courage she had shown. Seren, too, began to open up. She stayed, closer to Ethan, no longer hiding in the shadows. She shared her knowledge, how her healing touch could help others, how she longed to find peace after losing her family and home. The town realized that she was not an alien to fear, but a being, full of hope and strength. Ethan and Seren became a symbol of trust between two very different worlds. They showed that kindness could break down walls, and understanding could heal wounds deeper than any injury. And though Seren still missed her lost home and the people she loved, she found something new: friendship, safety, and a place to call her own. Together they faced the future, not as strangers, but as family.